Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Good news regarding Palestine. I will now put on my spectacles and read you the story, or at least parts of it. Here is the headline. UN General Assembly calls on Security Council to admit Palestine as member. That's it. That's the good news. Now I'll read you about it. It was written by Rafi Berg from BBC News. The United Nations General Assembly has enhanced Palestine's rights within the organization and called for it to be accepted as a member. Palestine has had non-member status since 2012, which allows some rights short of a full member. Membership can only be decided by the UN Security Council. The U.S. recently vetoed a bid for full membership, but Friday's vote can be seen as a gesture of support for the Palestinians. Pause. Predictably, the U.S. vetoed it. Again, the U.S., as always, in the pocket of Israel. What a shame. What a shame. I was just chatting with a neighbor of mine, a guy named David, very nice guy, a retired chef. And he told me about Michigan. He is from Michigan originally, and the large Muslim population in Michigan, which there is, and how Biden has basically lost the Muslim vote in Michigan. Yeah. I mean, why would a Muslim support Biden when Biden has financed Netanyahu's war in Gaza? Why? It makes no sense. And so these Muslims in Michigan are behaving in the interests of themselves, their families, and their communities in not supporting Joe Biden. And I say, more power to them. Of course, the alternative, Donald J. Trump, may be even more of a disaster. Certainly, Biden is fascistic, but Trump is a classical fascist, not that much different from Mussolini. I'm not going to compare him to Hitler. I don't like Hitler comparisons. And I don't think that it's fair to compare Trump rather to Hitler. But Mussolini, a little bit, yes, a little bit. And I think he does have some of the characteristics that Mussolini had as the head of fascist Italy. Okay. The U.S. recently vetoed a bid for full membership, but Friday's vote can be seen as a gesture of support for the Palestinians. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas welcomed the resolution, saying it supported Palestinian efforts for another vote on the issue by the Security Council. Pause. I hope so. I hope there is a vote, and I hope the U.S. does not veto it. Do I think that will happen? No. I think the same thing, the same soap opera that's been occurring for decades will simply repeat itself again. The measure will be raised. The U.S., as the middleman for Israel, will simply veto it. And so Palestine will continue having a non-member status in the Security Council. Palestine will continue its endeavor to obtain full membership in the UN, he said in a statement. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, said the body had welcomed a terror state into its ranks. Isn't that what is sometimes called The pot calling the kettle black. The pot calling the kettle black. Israel is a terror state. Israel is the major terror state in the world today, with its terrorist campaign in Gaza. Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Gaza is not a terrorist state. It is an indigenous part of the world and is not even a state. So, Israel's ambassador, in calling Gaza a terror state, or maybe Palestine as a whole a terror state, apparently he does not know the status or what is Palestine. That Palestine is not a state, and that is because of the actions of Israel, supported faithfully by the United States. I'm trying to refrain from using profanity. If you see me pausing, that's what I'm doing. I don't want to use profanity in this podcast, and so I'm resisting it. I feel that if I did use it, it would be righteous indignation, and I do believe that righteous indignation is a reason to use profanity. But I don't want to offend anybody, and my point can be made without using profanity, so I'm doing my best to avoid it. I'll stick to damn, things like that, pissed off, but I will try to avoid using actual profanity. And so far, I think, as far as I recall, I have been successful. Addressing the assembly, that's the ambassador of Israel to the UN, shredded a copy of the UN Charter. He shredded a copy of the UN Charter. The ambassador to the UN? Isn't that a contradiction? Why doesn't he resign as the UN ambassador? Better yet, why doesn't Israel quit the UN? Israel is a true terrorist state in the United Nations. It is Israel that should resign. It is Israel that should explain its reasons for calling Hamas a terrorist group and Gaza a terrorist state. It is Israel that will at some point have a price to pay for its actions. Again, sorry for the pauses. Again, I am doing my best to avoid using profanity. It comes amid reports that several European countries plan to recognize a Palestinian state. EU, European Union, Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell told Spanish broadcast RTVE on Thursday, that was yesterday, that Spain would do so on May 21st. That's 11 days from now. He had previously said Ireland, Slovenia, and Malta would also take that step without confirming the date. Friday's UN resolution confers additional rights on Palestine at the world body, allowing it to take part fully in debates, propose agenda items, and have its representatives elected to committees. If only that was going to happen. If only. It will still not, however, have the right to cast a vote, something the General Assembly does not have the power to grant and would have to be backed by the Security Council. The issue of Palestinian statehood has vexed the international community for decades. In 1988, the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, the main representative of the Palestinians, first declared the establishment of the State of Palestine. According to the Reuters news agency, Palestinian statehood has been recognized by 139 of the 193 member states. Isn't that a majority? Isn't that a majority? It is a majority. But as in the US, majorities don't matter. Majorities don't matter. Power matters. The US has power. Israel has power. These other nations can vote for Palestine to become a member state, but they do not have power. They have no power at all. No power at all. In practice, the Palestinians have limited self-government through the Palestinian Authority, PA, in parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The PA lost control of the Gaza Strip to Hamas in 2007. The UN considers both territories as occupied by Israel. Let me start that again. The UN considers both territories as occupied by Israel and comprising a single political unit. Israel does not recognize Palestinian statehood, and the current Israeli government opposes the creation of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. It argues such a state would be a threat to Israel's existence. Pause. Why again is Israel going back into its meme of existence? You must acknowledge Israel's right to exist. Who cares? Who cares if Palestine would be a threat to Israel's existence? First, I don't think it would be. I think that is pure rhetoric on the part of Israel. How can membership of Palestine in the UN threaten the existence of another member of the UN? That makes no sense at all. And I think that anyone who thinks about it clearly will arrive at the same conclusion. Does Israel care? No, Israel doesn't care. Israel just wants to end the quest for Palestinian statehood, just as Israel now is trying to push the Gazans into Egypt or into the sea. Israel does not care. It does not care at all. The US endorses the creation of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel, the so-called two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict, but says such a state should come only through direct negotiations between the two sides. Pause. Well, what a nice game. What a nice game the US is playing. What a nice game. The US can say, oh yeah, we support Palestinian statehood, but we think that that Palestinian statehood needs to be agreed to in negotiations between Israel and Palestine, knowing full well that Israel will never agree to it. I mean, people who work in the US government are not stupid. I don't think. The majority of them, they are smart people. They know what they are doing. And what they are doing is preventing Palestinian statehood while at the same time creating a facade of tolerance. A facade of tolerance. It's not real tolerance. It's the appearance of tolerance. Neither Israel nor the US would tolerate a Palestinian state. So the US can say all it wants about a two-state solution, which Israel has already rejected, which Netanyahu has already rejected, which the right-wing parties in the Israeli government have already rejected. It doesn't matter. That Palestinian state, under present circumstances, will never come into existence. There's that word existence again, apparently a term which can only be applied to Israel with its right to exist and not to Palestine. Continuing. Last month, the U.S. used its veto power as one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to block a widely backed Algerian resolution seeking Palestine's admittance as a state, calling it premature. Yeah, calling it premature. How nice. What a nice, convenient excuse. Calling it premature. Yeah, premature, meaning we oppose it. In other words, anybody who looks at U.S. actions and doesn't recognize that the U.S. opposes the two-state solution, which it has said it supports, is a fool. Clearly, the U.S. does not support the two-state solution, but the U.S. recognizes that saying it supports it is beneficial, is politically beneficial, even though it knows that under present circumstances, that will never happen. How long those present circumstances will continue is anyone's guess. I hope not for that long, but no one knows. Finally, Security Council resolutions are legally binding, whereas General Assembly resolutions are not. There you go. That's the article. I am sorry for the frequent pauses while I muddle this thing over in my head and cried to myself about the situation in Gaza. If the situation in Gaza is not enough to wake up the U.S. to not veto this Algerian resolution, then what will be? The answer is absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing can occur that will end the objections of the U.S. to Palestinian statehood, to end the objections of Israel to Palestinian statehood. Israel is a kind of precarious place. On the one hand, it seems to have the U.S. in its back pocket. On the other hand, it seems to be the 51st U.S. state. That's kind of a contradiction, but not really. Here's why I say not really. Because in reality, there is virtually no difference between the U.S. and Israel. The U.S. may pretend to object to some things Israel is doing occasionally. But ever since the U.S. put the state of Israel over the line in the United Nations, creating Israel as an independent country, the U.S. has remained at Israel's side and has never left it. And I can't see a circumstance under which it ever will. And so that is the world that we live in right now. A world dominated by 2 terrorist states, the United States and the State of Israel. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.